For the weekend in it, there's nothing quite like a good bonfire. The glow, the flames rising, gather around, let off a few fireworks, and hey, throw in a pile of vanities for good measure.
The governor of the central bank in Ireland said to me, "It looks like this weekend," this is a few years ago, "you will have to put the army around the banks and around the ATM machines."
Alan Kelly on his own cannot solve this issue.
Well, that was some yarn about calling in the army to protect the banks. Inevitably, the Taoiseach was going to be asked, did the governor of the central bank really ask you to have the army on standby?
There were no detailed discussions about what might happen or what would need to happen in terms of a new currency or an existing currency or whatever in that regard. We discussed the question of security issues, the possibility that the euro might break up.
But this was a story told to an international gathering in Madrid. The central bank governor didn't want to be drawn into it, but he might yet.
Earlier this week I wrote to Governor Honohan to ask him to clarify, did this conversation ever take place with the Taoiseach? And if it did, to clarify the context of the conversation. Was it about domestic problems with the Irish banks, or was it that we were caught up in a wider Eurozone crisis?
So this isn't just, one of Enda's tall tales. This is tomfoolery repeated. I think he was spoofing.
The Taoiseach's colleagues insist the opposition parties simply want people to forget just how scary it was back then.
We really must appreciate how close Ireland came to its economy collapsing and indeed to the Eurozone collapsing. We would have needed to engage the army in protecting the state and the security of the state had those contingency plans needed to be called on if the Eurozone had crashed.
The country survived, as did the government. The political battles and sniping, though, have taken a toll. And they're not over yet. Agreement on a package to tackle housing and rent certainty remains unfinished business. Alan Kelly didn't hold back on critics inside the government this week who blamed him for holding up agreement.
I take no notice of anonymous commentary. If people are cowardly and they don't want to put their names to stuff, that's their own business. But I don't get worried about anonymous press officer briefings basically taking on myself for making comments about myself.
Despite this swipe, there is real pressure to reach a deal.
I believe we're dealing with reasonable people, and I believe that they are equally concerned about the situation in relation to housing in the country. So it's not as if it's an option. It isn't. We have to find a solution to what is affecting people in relation to housing. So compromise will be found.
But you never know what lies in the shadows and darkness. Once it was like this. It's funny how politicians can fan the flames of trouble in a quiet week. It can be a scary time, Halloween.